Welcome to Jackson Lewis's podcast, We Get Work. Focused solely on workplace issues, it is our job to help employers develop proactive strategies, strong policies, and business-oriented solutions to cultivate an engaged, stable, and inclusive workforce. Our podcast identifies issues that influence and impact the workplace and its continuing evolution, and helps answer the question on every employer's mind: how will my business be impacted? While it has become more than commonplace to see the term AI utilized in an infinite variety of business, technology, and cultural contexts, its precise definition and implication is not always fully understood in the workplace or in law. And when it comes to adoption, as no single type of AI performs all functions, employers must identify which type or subset of AI, generative AI, machine learning, predictive analytics, or natural language processing, their organization is considering or already using. So, understanding how various laws and regulations may impact AI's use is crucial. On this episode of our AI podcast series, We Get AI for Work, we delve into a deeper understanding of the different types of AI and the evolving legal landscape that is shaping and being shaped by AI. Today's hosts are Eric Felsberg, principal in Jackson Lewis's Long Island office, and Joe Lazzarati, principal in the firm's Tampa office and co-leaders of the firm's AI service group. Eric and Joe, given the diverse types of expanding use and adoption of AI and similar technologies, and the various inconsistent approach state regulators are taking by focusing on different aspects of AI use, the question on everyone's mind today is, how can organizations strike a balance between AI reliance and local law compliance, and how does that impact my organization?
Hey, thanks, Alicia. We're here on our next installment of our We Get AI podcast. I'm Joe Lazzarati. I'm in our Tampa office, and I have the pleasure of being here with my partner, Eric Felsberg. Today, we wanted to talk a little bit about what exactly is AI. I know we're getting a lot of questions from clients who want to have a policy to kind of provide some guidelines around the use of AI. And one of the questions that comes up is, well, what kind of AI are you using? Are you using more AI machine learning type of technology? Are you using generative AI like ChatGPT? And maybe, one place to start with that, Eric, is just let's talk about maybe the definition, how we kind of think about those two categories.
Thanks, Joe. And yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think what's been on the scene most lately has been generative AI and, the traditional AI, which a lot of us are used to, right? That's the AI that typically focuses on a specific task, right? It's designed to respond to a particular set of inputs. It largely has, the capacity to learn from data and is used to make predictions, right? So a lot of data analysis and predictive analytics, right? That's really kind of contemplating traditional AI. To think of an example of what traditional AI, how that would be used in the workplace, and a lot of employers may be familiar with this. Think about, you have a job vacancy. There's 1,000 applications you just received in response to that job vacancy announcement, and you use traditional AI to help you vet those 1,000 applications, right? And essentially maybe what it's doing is it's kind of searching the application and looking at, for content matches, those that most closely, match the job posting or the job description, right? So it's really kind of analyzing data and making predictions. That's traditional AI. As I mentioned, generative AI, this is the one that lately has been receiving all the buzz, right? And so generative AI really is an AI platform that we use to create something new, right? It's also trained on data. It learns from underlying patterns. But, as Joe mentioned a moment ago, ChatGPT, from OpenAI, their language prediction model, right? That's an example of generative AI. So if you think about, in contrast to traditional AI, what would be a use case for generative AI? And just sticking with the same very simple example, right? The example I gave where, you have a job vacancy announcement, you have 1,000 applications, you're using traditional AI to help you vet those. But if you were trying to maybe create an application form or create a job posting, that's where generative AI can come in, right? So if it learns from a certain, set of data that we have in terms of our qualifications and, and the like that we look for in a successful job applicant, how do we create a job posting? Can we create an application form? And that's where generative AI would come in. It would help you create new content.
Yeah, that's a great example. So the idea is when you're thinking about how do we take a bunch of data and obtain some predictive value from it, have the AI learn from that data, maybe as you introduce new data, and kind of get some helpful information or insights or predictive value in terms of the applicants, as an example, versus creating or coming up with new content based on some content that you feed into the algorithm or the large language model or whatever the model that you're using. That would be more generative AI. And we're kind of seeing that also in terms of, other examples might be deep fake technology, looking at generating someone's voice or video from generative AI. And in terms of how that technology is being used, I think I want to get your view on this too, Eric, in terms of how are we seeing the laws develop? Because it seems to me when I look at some of the statutes and regulations that are being drafted and some that have passed, in some cases, the law is really focused on the more traditional AI models that you talked about, while others are trying to address some of the risks that are coming with the generative AI. So like, for example, on the generative AI side, we're seeing there's a statute that was passed in Tennessee trying to help protect the image of celebrities, for example. And it seems like a little bit broader of a statute, although similar in vein in terms of the use of one's likeness in Illinois, where the concern is we want to be careful about creating someone's image and using it in a way that can hurt them or for financial gain. What are you seeing in terms of kind of the traditional AI approach and how the laws kind of focus there at just kind of at a high level at this point?
Yeah, I know it's actually pretty interesting, right? To kind of look at these different jurisdictions and try to see what that legislature in that particular jurisdiction is concerned about, right? So with traditional AI, one of the concerns that we always have whenever you're doing any sort of data analysis and, in the employment context, making employment decisions is the issue of disparate impact and bias, right? And so we see other jurisdictions, I think most notably in recent memory is the New York City, what they call the AEDT law in the city of New York, and that's the Automated Employment Decision Tool law. And that really focuses on the question of disparate impact, right? And without going through all the requirements of what that particular law in New York City requires, one of the primary requirements of the law is that, any employer who's using an AI platform, and I'm paraphrasing, and, using an AI platform to make employment decision tools. So think about the example I gave earlier where, using it to make hiring decisions based off of an applicant pool. What New York City is requiring is for those employers that are using an AI platform for purposes such as that, they have to not only perform the bias audit, right? It has to be performed by an independent party. So they have to perform that bias audit. But then what they also have to do is publish it, right? So, think about this for a minute. New York City is requiring you to conduct a disparate impact analysis by race, sex, and ethnicity, and then take that analysis and publish it on your website in the career section for kind of all the world to see, right? The theory being that, job seekers would have that information and inform their application to a particular job. So yeah, that's just one example, but it is interesting to see how different jurisdictions are, focused on particular aspects of AI usage.
Yeah, and I think, for this episode, I think we were talking about, hey, we're getting these questions from clients about policies and how do we create a governance around this technology. And I know we are planning on some installments in the podcast to come on policy development, but I do think it is important, right, to, before you put pen to paper, right, is to say, well, what are we really what is this AI? How are we planning to use it in our organization? What are our use cases? What are we trying to regulate exactly? Because on the one hand, what you're talking about in terms of traditional AI seems to maybe lend itself perhaps to a smaller, just as one way to think about policy development, you may be focused on a smaller group within the organization that may be vetting or developing more traditional AI technologies, whereas generative AI may be a broader group of employees that may be utilizing that type of model of AI or application, and then in different departments. So it really is kind of a threshold question that companies need to consider when they're trying to start out and think about how they introduce that technology into their organization. You agree with that?
Yeah, and I think it brings up this issue of over reliance on this AI, right? So AI has kind of really come onto the scene in a strong way, and I think some folks think of it as kind of a magic box, right? It's going to help me make all my decisions, and I'll kind of sit back and put my feet up. But certainly when you're in the position of over relying on algorithms, right, to drive decisions. So again, going back to the very simple example that I used,